What happens when a city grows so fast that it forgets what it had once built beneath its own feet? We pave over the mud, we stack skyscraper on top of skyscraper, and we pretend the dark doesn't exist anymore. But directly underneath the streets where you walk, shop, and catch your morning train sits a lightless, multi-tiered maze of decaying brick, flooded utility vaults, and forgotten transit corridors. And whenever a space stays dark for long enough, two things happen. Rumors start to grow in the shadows, and real things move in to fill the void. Welcome back to Chilled Bones. I'm Robert Ference, writer and raconteur of high strangeness, self-proclaimed. If you're new here, dim the lights, lock the door, and don't go anywhere, because tonight we're dropping beneath the concrete to investigate some of the most chilling subterranean legends on the planet. We're going to pull back the iron gates on the blind, cold-blooded predators lurking in the drainage pipes of New York City and examine the tragic human realities of the forgotten societies living inside pitch-black flood channels. Then we'll cross the ocean to face the razorback beasts that hunted the Victorian sewer tunnels of London. And then we'll discover a monster that will permanently live in your nightmares for the rest of your days, and I guarantee this because the damn thing is stuck in my head right now. Real-world history spawned these legends. But the truly terrifying part is that documented evidence proves these stories aren't just campfire tales. Now, let's find out what's waiting in the darkness below. Let's begin with the undisputed king of subterranean urban folklore, the classic, universally recognized myth of the New York City sewer alligator. The legend is as comfortable as it is unnerving. It tells us that deep beneath the bustling streets of Manhattan, in the pitch-black, decaying arterial pipes of the city's vast drainage system, lives an entire breeding population of blind, albino, hyper-aggressive alligators. Deprived of natural sunlight for generations, their skin has allegedly bleached into a ghostly, translucent white. Their eyes have withered into useless, milky spheres, leaving them to navigate by scent and lateral vibration through gallons of cold subterranean waste. They feed on rats, rotting offal, and the occasional unlucky municipal worker who strays too far from the regular path. Sounds like a classic B-movie setup. The kind of urban myth you'd dismiss over a beer at a corner bar. But where did this madness actually start? The origin dates back to the 1920s and 30s. Wealthy New York families vacationing in Florida would return home with novelty pets. Baby alligators, bought for $1 on some roadside souvenir shop from a guy who has no teeth. But a cute 6-inch reptile doesn't stay 6 inches for long. It grows. It gets snappy. Starts looking at the family cat with genuine culinary interest. And so, as the story goes, panicking suburban parents did what any reasonable 1930s adult would do. They dumped the squirming reptiles down the toilet, flushed, and assumed the problem was solved by the magic of modern plumbing. It's easy to laugh at that, because it feels like an absurd suburban legend crafted to keep children from playing near storm drains. Till you open the historical archives. That's where you discover that on February 10th, 1935, the legend crossed over into brutal, documented reality. On a freezing Tuesday afternoon in East Harlem, a group of teenagers were shoveling snow down a manhole on 123rd Street. As they looked down into the dark, slush-filled storm basin below, they saw something moving in the muck. Not a rat, not a dog. It was an 8-foot, 125-pound American alligator, half frozen and trapped in the icy sewage sludge. The boys dropped a rope down the shaft, snared it, then hauled the thrashing, snapping beast onto the snow-covered street. When the thing lunged at them, they were forced to dispatch it with their snow shovels. The incident was documented on the front page of the New York Times. And that wasn't the only isolated anomaly. Throughout the mid-20th century, sporadic reports from sewer workers confirmed that living, thriving crocodiles were occasionally pulled from the drainage vaults across the 5 boroughs. Even as recently as February 2023, an 8-foot alligator, cold, lethargic, but undeniably real, was rescued from Prospect Park Lake in Brooklyn. People throwing dangerous apex predators into public infrastructure isn't just a myth. It's a recurring habit. The sewer alligator remains the ultimate manifestation of human neglect coming back to bite us from below. We flush our unwanted mistakes into the dark, assuming the city machinery will digest them. But nature is stubborn. It adapts. And every once in a while, it crawls right back up through the pipes to remind us who really owns the dark. If the thought of cold-blooded reptiles in the sewers unnerves you, this next stop on our descent takes us into a realm that is far closer to home. Because the monsters in this legend don't have scales. They have human faces and a name. The Mole People. The legend claims that far beneath the streets of Manhattan, deep inside multi-tiered abandoned rail corridors and forgotten utility vaults, thousands of discarded citizens have formed organized, lawless underground societies. According to the dark internet lore version of this myth, these aren't just unhoused individuals looking for shelter. The legend insists that generations have been born in total darkness. Humans who have never seen the sun, who've developed severe photosensitivity, feral behavioral traits, and a fiercely territorial, violent hostility towards anyone who wanders into their territory. It's a terrifying concept. The idea of a parallel human species evolving in darkness right beneath our feet in this day and age. The myth gained explosive global momentum in the 1990s, fueled by sensationalized media coverage that painted these underground encampments not as a tragic humanitarian crisis, but as a mysterious subterranean tribal kingdom. But what happens when you strip away the urban legend and look at the actual forensic historical reality? What you find isn't a sci-fi monster movie. It's the Freedom Tunnel, and a documented history that's far more haunting. Stretching for nearly 3 miles underneath Manhattan's Riverside Park, the Freedom Tunnel was originally built by Robert Moses in the 1930s as a covered rail corridor for the New York Central Railroad. By the 1970s, train traffic dwindled. The corridor was largely abandoned, and the pitch-black 3-mile cavern became a hidden sanctuary for hundreds of people escaping the harsh Manhattan winters. These residents didn't live like feral animals in the dirt. They engineered an entire subterranean society inside the dark. They built elaborate, multi-room wooden shanties nestled inside the massive concrete recesses of the tunnel walls. They tapped directly into Amtrak's high-voltage electrical lines to run refrigerators, hot plates, televisions, and electric heaters. They spliced into city water pipes, hung framed art on dark concrete walls, and set up a makeshift legal system to settle disputes without surface police intervention. To the millions of New Yorkers walking their dogs through Riverside Park directly above, the tunnel was just an empty stone. But directly beneath their feet, an underground community was thriving in the dim light of work lamps and street grate shafts. And the actual documented records from inside that tunnel is the kind of thing that makes you realize that the reality is far more terrifying than the legend. In the late 1980s and early 90s, documentary filmmaker Mark Singer lived inside the Freedom Tunnel for months to record their daily lives for the film Dark Days. He documented residents dealing with real-world subterranean hazards that surface dwellers could barely comprehend. When heavy winter blizzards hit Manhattan, freezing air rushed through the massive street ventilation shafts, turning the tunnel into a sub-zero wind tunnel. Residents had to build elaborate stovepipe chimneys that vented smoke up through the sidewalk grates on Riverside Drive, leading to panicked calls from pedestrians reporting smoke pouring out of the ground. Even more terrifying were the active train sweeps. In 1991, Amtrak decided to reopen the line for Empire service trains. Suddenly, 40-ton passenger trains began hurtling through the tight, lightless 3-mile corridor at 50 miles per hour. Residents had mere seconds to dodge into narrow wall alcoves as the steel engines roared past, the vacuum of air threatening to pull their makeshift wooden homes onto the active tracks. The crisis reached its peak in 1996 when federal authorities and Amtrak police launched a massive forced evacuation sweep. Bulldozers were brought into the dark to smash the underground homes, clearing out the shanty towns and sealing off access to shafts with heavy iron doors. The true horror of the Mole People was never that feral mutants were lurking in the subways waiting to drag you into the vents. The horror is that human beings are so resilient and societal safety nets are so profoundly broken that hundreds of our fellow citizens spent decades building a fully functioning, electrified city in total darkness, living, cooking, and sleeping directly alongside speeding passenger trains while the surface world walked right over their roofs. To find our next subterranean nightmare, we have to cross the Atlantic and travel back in time to the filthy, overcrowded streets of 19th century Victorian London. Long before modern wastewater management, London was a city choking on its own waste, and beneath its cobblestones lay the Fleet Ditch, an ancient river that had been converted into a massive, bricked-over toxic sewer system running straight into the Thames River. It was out of this dark, subterranean filth that one of the strangest, most visceral urban legends in British history was born. The legend of the sewer pigs. According to Victorian street lore, a pig carrying a litter of piglets had slipped into the open drainage mouth of the Fleet sewer during a flood. The pigs were trapped in the lightless labyrinth of brick channels beneath the city, but they didn't die. They survived. And they adapted. The legend claimed that generations of pigs bred with each other in absolute darkness, feeding on garbage, slaughterhouse waste, and raw sewage. Over the decades, these creatures allegedly mutated into a terrifying subspecies. Blind, razor-backed, hyper-aggressive beasts with elongated snouts and razor-sharp tusks, roaming the brick tunnels in ravenous packs, ready to devour any sewer worker or scavenger who stepped into their path. The story was often published in the penny dreadfuls and the sensationalized press papers of the era. The upper classes whispered about the legend over tea, while the working classes warned their children never to look down in the storm drains. Sounds pretty absurd. Mutated flesh-eating sewer pigs ruling the Victorian underbelly. So what kernel of real-world horror created this legend? In the 1800s, an entire informal economy existed in the London sewers. A class of desperate scavengers known as toshers illegally waded through waist-deep human waste, industrial runoff, and rotting carcasses, hunting for dropped coins, scrap iron, and discarded silver. Time after time, these people returned from the surface with chilling reports of horrible things they had seen down there. They weren't encountering mythical monsters. They were coming face to face with massive, feral, disease-ridden pigs that had escaped from the very unhygienic slaughterhouses lining the Fleet River. These animals had fallen into open waste shafts of the slaughterhouses and into the main sewer, They grew monstrously aggressive from starvation and were actively hunting anything that moved along the brick pipes. So the legend of the sewer pigs is actually true, which is seriously gross. Fast forward to the modern era, and London's sewers are still spawning horrors, though of a very different industrial nature. This part is even grosser than pigs escaping a slaughterhouse through a waste tunnel, if you can believe it. Today, sewer engineers beneath London regularly encounter Fatbergs, colossal rock-hard masses of congealed cooking grease, wet wipes, and organic waste. Some of these grotesque subterranean formations weigh up to 200 tons and stretch for hundreds of yards, completely choking off entire sections of tunnel. And when cleaning teams cut into these massive rotting grease monsters, they report a terrifying phenomenon: a sickening, heavy breathing sound echoing down the pipes caused by pressurized pockets of trapped methane and hydrogen sulfide gas slowly escaping the organic mass. Whether it's a pack of feral 19th century swine waiting in the dark or a 200-ton rotting mass of urban waste groaning beneath the pavement, the London sewers have always had a way of reminding us that what we hide beneath the floorboards never stays hidden for long. For our final stop, we return to the United Kingdom, to a region built on centuries of heavy coal mining, steel production, and sprawling ancient industrial drainage lines. And unlike legends that rely on secondhand urban lore or vague 19th century newspaper clippings, this final entry brings us face to face with a subterranean nightmare captured in high-definition digital video. This is the legend of the Sheffield sewer monster. For years, utility crews sweeping the aging Victorian sewer networks beneath northern England reported strange, unsettling visual anomalies on their closed-circuit crawler cameras. They spoke in hushed tones about encountering massive, pulsating, flesh-colored masses clinging to the cold brickwork. Shapes that didn't look like grease, didn't look like tree roots, and appeared to actively expand, contract, and react when the bright camera lights hit them in the pitch-black pipes. To the public, it sounded like a classic internet creepypasta, a sci-fi story about a mutated, chemical-fed monster growing under the city streets. Then came the official inspection footage. A team of municipal water engineers deployed a high-definition remote camera into a deep drainage line beneath Sheffield. As the mechanical rover crawled down the wet, lightless pipe, its LED headlights illuminated something hanging from the ceiling rivets that brought the operators to a dead stop. Clinging to the damp wall was a massive, writhing, brain-like mass of translucent blood-red tissue. It had no eyes, no limbs, no defined skeletal structure, but as the camera approached it, the entire mass began to rhythmically pulse and contract, a collective hypnotic muscular spasm that looked horrifyingly like a giant disembodied human organ breathing inside the sewer line. When the footage leaked online, the internet exploded with theories. Alien organisms, biological weapons tests, mutated mammalian tissue surviving in the waste. So what was the cold biological reality behind this subterranean horror? When marine biologists and environmental scientists examined the forensic examples, they identified the organism, and the reality turned out to be far more disturbing than any alien invasion story. It wasn't a single monster. It was a massive, interconnected colony of tubiflex, commonly known as sewage worms. In heavy industrial drainage zones where water is polluted and choked with organic waste and almost completely deprived of oxygen, individual tubiflex worms can't survive on their own. So, to adapt to the hostile, toxic environment created by human industry, Millions of these translucent red thread-like creatures entangle their bodies together into a single massive superorganism. They weave themselves into a living, pulsating carpet of flesh. The outer layer of the worms contracts to protect the inner core from toxic chemicals, while the entire mass twitches in unison to circulate whatever faint traces of oxygen remain in the stagnant water. Think about the psychological reality of that discovery. In the dark, lightless pipes directly beneath urban shopping districts and quiet residential streets, life doesn't just survive. It mutates its behavior. Nature takes thousands of microscopic creatures and fuses them into a single writhing, pulsating mass of flesh that reacts to the heat and light of any human foolish enough to peer down that pipe. It's not a sci-fi alien drop from the sky. It's a biological response to our own industrial filth. A real-life, documented horror story operating inside the municipal plumbing, proving that when we create a toxic, lightless world beneath our cities, nature will build things to inhabit them that we couldn't imagine in our worst nightmares. So, what have we learned as we dragged ourselves back up into the sunlight from the deep, murky depths of these subterranean urban legends? We learned that New York City alligators aren't just a campfire story. They're the documented result of human carelessness meeting the resilience of nature. We learned that the mole people aren't feral mutants, but a haunting testament to human survival inside dark storm drains. We discovered that the pig-faced beasts of London were the horrific reality of 19th century industrial filth, and giant sewer worms are uniting and forming massive clusters right under our feet. Turns out we don't need fictional monsters or fake internet hoaxes to be terrified of the dark underneath us. The combination of human history, extreme engineering, and our own overwhelming desire to bury our trash in the dark has created a subterranean world that is far stranger and far more unnerving than anything we could ever invent. The next time you walk down a quiet city street at night alone, and you step over an iron ventilation grate, listen closely. Feel the warm, damp draft rising up against your ankles. And whatever you do, don't look down. I'm Robert Ferentz, and this is Chilled Bones. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you survived this descent tonight. And if you like to read horror stories and you're interested in the strange and macabre, which I imagine you are, please check out my horror novels. You can find more about them at chilledbones.com. And as always, sleep well, if you can.